Zak Brown has unleashed one of the most explosive attacks on Max Verstappen and Red Bull that the Formula One paddock has heard in years, and the timing could not be more dramatic. Started as a passing remark buried within his new book, has spiraled into a full-scale controversy because Brown has not merely criticized Verstappen, he has accused him of reshaping Red Bull into his own personal empire. According to Brown, Verstappen is no longer just a driver. He is the force pulling the strings from inside the team, the figure everyone tiptoes around, and the reason why Red Bull have built a structure that bends entirely to his will. He claims mechanics, engineers and decision-makers alike have become subservient to him, creating an environment where Verstappen sits not just at the center of the car, but at the center of the entire organization. And these accusations haven't just landed, they've detonated. Brown's words spread through the paddock like wildfire because he does not deal in vague hints or soft diplomacy. He goes straight for the pressure points. He paints Verstappen as the most powerful single driver in modern Formula One, someone who holds a level of influence that would make even the greats uncomfortable. The idea that Red Bull are afraid of him, tailoring every technical detail to suit his style while refusing to hire any teammate who could challenge his authority, is a direct attack on the DNA of a team that once prided itself on ruthless competition. Brown's claim that the RB21 has been sculpted so precisely around Verstappen that no other driver can handle it effectively has only intensified the storm. And all of this comes at a moment when Verstappen's grip on the championship is slipping, which makes the timing of Brown's verbal strike even more explosive. Paddock expected tension heading into the final races, but nobody expected Brown to light the fuse so boldly. His accusations have forced Red Bull into an uncomfortable spotlight, raised fresh questions about Verstappen's true level of control within the team, and ignited a debate that cuts through team politics, driver hierarchy, and championship pressure all at once. It is not just a statement. It is a direct challenge to Verstappen's power, Red Bull's integrity, and the foundations of their success. And with the season reaching boiling point, this shocking attack could not have arrived at a more volatile moment. According to Brown, the warning signs surrounding Red Bull's internal structure have been visible for far longer than anyone dared to admit. He argues that Verstappen's extraordinary run of victories since 2021 did not simply reflect a period of unmatched driving brilliance, but a deeper shift in how the team operated behind closed doors. In Brown's view, Verstappen became the axis around which everything rotated, from aerodynamic concepts to simulator preparation to the very philosophy of how the RB21 should be driven. Brown describes not just an emphasis on Verstappen's preferences, but an organizational transformation in which every instinct, every reaction, and every strategic choice was filtered through the single question: what would Max want? He goes further by claiming that Red Bull deliberately avoided hiring any teammate capable of challenging Verstappen's authority. The Carlos Sainz example, according to Brown, was the clearest demonstration of this fear. He argues that Sainz, with his racecraft, adaptability, and pedigree, would have been the perfect candidate for a second Red Bull seat. Yet the idea was dismissed because it risked unsettling Verstappen's carefully defended position. Brown portrays this as evidence of a team that has moved away from competitive purity and instead embraced self-preservation at the cost of equality. The notion that a world-class organization would intentionally weaken its own driver lineup was in his eyes the ultimate sign that something had shifted beyond repair. What truly startled the paddock was Brown's sharpness in describing the cultural consequences of this shift. He paints a vivid picture of engineers refusing to push back against Verstappen's criticism, strategists bending to his preferences without debate, and management treating his voice as final even when alternatives existed. The idea that the RB21 had become undrivable for anyone but Verstappen was not just a complaint about car characteristics. It was, in Brown's interpretation, a symbol of how deeply the team had surrendered independence. He borrows the phrase Max Verstappen rule to describe the unwritten law that nothing must undermine Verstappen's comfort, rhythm, or dominance, a concept that slices to the core of Red Bull's once fierce competitive ethos. His comments about Christian Horner add another explosive layer to the story. Brown suggests that Horner's long stewardship of the team allowed Verstappen's influence to expand unchecked, creating habits and patterns that no leadership change could easily undo. Brown hints that Horner's reluctance to impose boundaries, not out of weakness but out of a desire to protect results, slowly eroded internal accountability. When Horner was dismissed in mid-2025, speculation immediately emerged about tensions behind the scenes, and although Verstappen denied involvement, Brown's assertions rekindled the suspicion that Verstappen's power within the team had become too large for any principal to comfortably manage. Brown's rivalry with Horner has been simmering for years, and his latest remarks are steeped in that long-standing tension. He views Horner's approach as the antithesis of what McLarens strive to be. Where he sees Red Bull bending to one man, he insists McLaren must stand for balance, structure and competition driven by merit rather than hierarchy. Invoking Ron Dennis and Mansour Orje, Brown draws a stark contrast between the McLaren philosophy and what he perceives to be Red Bull's growing dependency on Verstappen. The implication is clear. McLaren, under his leadership, will never be a team run by fear or governed by the demands of a single personality. Brown's attack becomes even sharper when addressing Verstappen's conduct behind the wheel. He labels Verstappen a bruiser, fierce elbows out, occasionally crossing the limits of acceptable aggression. Brown cites moments like the 2021 São Paulo Grand Prix as evidence, pointing out that even Adrian Newey admitted Verstappen's defense against Hamilton pushed far beyond the sporting boundaries. Brown argues that Verstappen's ultra-aggressive style is not simply instinctive, but psychological, a way of intimidating rivals and forcing them to make decisions under duress. He claims that Red Bull's protection of Verstappen has only amplified this behavior, allowing him to operate with fewer consequences than others would endure. The fan reaction, however, revealed a deep divide in how Verstappen is perceived. Many pushed back fiercely against Brown's comments, arguing that Verstappen has matured significantly in recent seasons and that the reckless aggression of his early years has evolved into calculated brilliance. They see his moves as decisive rather than dangerous, a hallmark of experience rather than arrogance. Others, however, argued that Brown's comments touched on an uncomfortable truth, that Verstappen's confidence can tip into hostility and that his dominance has occasionally insulated him from criticism that would be levelled at other drivers. The debate that followed Brown's comments showed just how polarising Verstappen remains, even after years of sustained success. Brown's remarks strike even harder given the current championship context. Verstappen, once the unstoppable titan of Formula One, now finds himself third in the standings, trailing Lando Norris by 49 points and facing mathematical elimination. Brown's words land at a moment when Verstappen's aura of invincibility is flickering, suggesting that the empire he built, intentionally or not, stands on shaky foundations. If Verstappen loses the title, Brown implies, the entire internal structure of Red Bull may be exposed for what it truly is: a team that sacrificed balance and resilience in exchange for sustaining a single driver's supremacy. Brown argues that this desperation to retain Verstappen has become Red Bull's Achilles heel. When a team operates in fear of losing a driver, he suggests, they lose their competitive edge. Systems become fragile. Accountability dissolves. Decisions are no longer based on long-term growth, but short-term appeasement. He claims that Red Bull are terrified of Verstappen walking away, terrified enough to shape their culture around preventing that outcome, even if it means constricting the ambitions of anyone else in the garage. Brown insists that such an approach is unsustainable, that it corrodes internal trust and undermines the spirit of competition on which great teams are built. The broader question that emerges from Brown's critique is whether Verstappen's influence is a natural consequence of extreme greatness, or a sign that Red Bull have relinquished too much control. Verstappen, for his part, denies any involvement in political matters and maintains that he drives hard but fair. Yet Brown's portrayal forces observers to question how much of Red Bull's identity now rests on Verstappen's presence. When does leadership turn into dependency? When does influence become dominance? These questions are now at the center of a debate the sport rarely dares to articulate. As the paddock processes Brown's remarks, Red Bull find themselves surrounded by uncertainty. Their performance has fluctuated, their leadership has been shaken, and their once untouchable image has been punctured by high-profile tensions and public criticism. McLaren, conversely, sense an opportunity. Brown's attack may not directly change anything on track, but it destabilizes Red Bull's image at a time when they can least afford distraction. The pressure now hangs not only over Verstappen, but over the entire organization as they attempt to defend their legacy under increasing scrutiny. The rivalry between McLaren and Red Bull has now intensified far beyond a battle of machinery. Brown's assault has transformed it into a clash of philosophy, culture, and power. He has thrown a verbal grenade into Red Bull's inner workings, and the repercussions will echo long after the season ends. Whether Verstappen responds through words or lets his driving answer the accusations, the damage has been done. What was once an unshakable fortress of dominance has been cracked open, revealing a side of Red Bull that Brown believes has gone unquestioned for too long. His challenge to Verstappen and Red Bull is not simply about speed, it is about the very identity of a team built around a single man.